Okay, welcome everyone to the September 13th council meeting of the City of Port Colborne. At this time, if we could have our national anthem. Great. Thank you to the McKay Choir once again. Tonight we have one proclamation council, the Rail Safety Week, September the... Wow. Encore. I guess somebody wanted an encore. We all set there, Mr. WeeStreem?
No, it's not. I don't understand my phone. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, great, thanks. So under proclamations, councillors, we have the Rail Safety Week of September 20 to 26th, 2021. If I can have councillors Beauregard and Bodner move that. Are there any questions to that? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Adoption of the agenda. If I can have councillors Kalaliff and Danch move the agenda. Are there any questions with regards to the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you. I'm noting no disclosures of interest. Are there any that came in late? Seeing none, thank you. Approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of council from August 23rd, 2021. If I have, we'll have councillors Bagu and Wells move those minutes. Are there any questions to the minutes? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, council. Items pulled this evening are items 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 8.1, 8.3, 8.4, and 8.6. If I could have councillors Bruno and Danch move the remainder of items, all raise your hand in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. We do not have any presentations or delegations. I'll get into the mayor's report at this time. Out of an abundance of caution, Ontario continues to pause its exit from the roadmap to reopening. Ensuring you get vaccinated is more important than ever with the new Delta variant of COVID-19. Please check ontario.ca for vaccination locations. And we ask you to watch our social media pages for complete updates as we receive them from the province. And at this time, it is still important for you to wear a mask and maintain social distancing. Staff are continuing to offer customer service support for residents, businesses, and visitors by phone, email, website, and social media channels. If you have questions in regards to City Hall services or would like to report a concern, you can contact our customer service department Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. by calling 905-835-2900, or you can email customerservice@portcolborne.ca. You can also visit our website at www.portcolborne.ca and submit a service request or inquiry by clicking on the Request a Service tab located in the top right corner of our website page. Big congratulations goes to Linda Calvert on winning the Port Colborne Ultimate Staycation Social Media Contest. For the month of August, residents and visitors were encouraged to find a Port Colborne photo frame at various locations across the city and snap a photo and tag the city on social media. Linda's winning photo was captured at the Port Colborne Museum, and she will take home 2 cruiser bikes from Gillies Sports Excellence located here in Port Colborne, $250 in gift cards to local dining establishment, $250 in gift cards to local retail businesses, a library prize package, and a private tour of the Port Colborne Marine and Historical Museum. Thank you to everyone who entered the contest, and thank you to our local businesses for contributing to this. Close to 300 people participated, and it was great to see all your smiling faces on all those photographs. On Sunday, September 19th, the Monarch Ultra Relay Run kicks off on a 21-day running adventure, raising awareness and funds in support of monarch butterflies. The relay run originally planned to follow the monarch migration from Canada to Mexico, as it did in 2019, but it's been shortened to an 1,800-kilometer run across southern Ontario with COVID-19 protocols in place to keep participants and supporters safe. Each morning, 2 ultra runners will begin a 50-kilometer leg at 8 a.m. and finish around 2 p.m., depending on their pace. Another 2 runners will pick up exactly where the first 2 left off and run a 30-kilometer leg. They will be coming through Port Colborne on September the 24th. The team hopes to meet many Canadians who are also passionate about protecting the earth along the route and already have several pop-ups planned to highlight communities involved in conservation actions such as native plant habitats and nectar gardens for pollinators. This year's run is raising funds for Camp Kawartha, a nonprofit organization that offers nature education programming for youth. The Monarch Ultra team invites people to come out and cheer on the runners along the way, as well as dress up in costumes and make signs for the runners who are running extremely long distances in support of monarch butterflies. The team will also be sharing stories on their 21-day journey through their social media sites and by following Monarch Ultra on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or visit their website at www.themonarchultra.com to learn more. On August the 26th, I was asked by Mayor Walter Sendzik of the City of St. Catharines, he's the current chair of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, to moderate a breakout session at their annual general meeting. The session was entitled Planning for the Future, Preparing for Socio-Economic Impacts of Climate Change, and included topics on tourism, climate migration, economic development along our coastlines, and social expectation of our shorelines. Matt Holmes from CKTB contacted me a couple of weeks ago to congratulate the city on H.H. Knoll Lakeview Park being voted the best park in Niagara. We talked about our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, the redevelopment of the former Icebox lands, and Lockview Park. I want to thank everyone who voted for us, and a special thank you to our parks crew for their continued vision of improving our parks for everyone's enjoyment. And this week we have Moonlight Flicks, again tomorrow evening, Tuesday, and then Thursday in H.H. Knoll Lakeview Park at dusk. Tuesday evening features the movie The Croods, about a prehistoric family who go on a road trip to a fantastical land, and Thursday evening features E.T., who just wants to go home. So pack up the family, a blanket, and some popcorn, and join us for an end-of-the-summer evening at Lakeview Park. We ask you to stay safe, and we thank everyone. Are there any questions with regards to the Mayor's report? Seeing none, I will move on to our next one. Regional Councillor Butters is not here this evening. Are there any questions with regards to Regional Council? Okay. Staff remarks. Staff that are here this evening, do you have any updates for Council?
Sure.
Scott, you want to start? CAO Louis?
Sure, through your worship to council, it is actually city policy or a practice that when staff attends a conference, we report back to council and council members as well. We report back to council about the attendance at the conference, and we haven't had to do that for a long, long time because of conferences. However, I did attend on behalf of the city, the AMO, that's the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference in August. It was virtually hosted by the City of London, and of course it was online. I always appreciate when council sends me to conferences for the chance to meet with other municipalities, continue professional development, and learn from some of our best practices, outside agencies, and suppliers to municipalities and other municipalities. In particular, there were sessions for each provincial party leader. There was I attended a ministers forum, which is several ministers taking questions and answers from a moderator and from other municipalities. I attended a session on regulating cannabis land use, municipal insurance premium increases, as well as building sustainable future cities. That was online resources and electronic resources for municipalities for sustainability. And as is mentioned in the report that was previously approved tonight, joined the mayor and the manager of strategic initiatives for six meetings with ministers and or the second in command parliamentary assistant of a ministry. And those meetings were very productive.
Great, thank you, Mr. Louis. Mr. Long, did you want to jump in on this? Because you and I and Scott need to give our report, so I'll let you go next. Oh, you're muted. Doesn't say you're muted, but we can't hear you. No, we can't hear you, Gary.
Can we hear anyone else?
Harry, you can hear him?
We don't hear the.
Yeah, we can't hear him in here.
Can't hear me?
Sorry.
Oh, there we go. Yep, go ahead. Now you can start.
Yeah, you can hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you now.
Okay, great. Yeah, just to build on CAO Louis' comments regarding our delegation at this year's AMO conference, by no means is it an end of our government relations strategy. In fact, it's really just the beginning. We're working with the Office of the Mayor and CAO and our Corporate Communications Division to reach out and invite ministers and parliamentary assistants to Port Colborne to see our city, to see the projects and initiatives that we're working on. And we will also be reaching out to government MPPs as well as opposition MPPs as well. So stay tuned for more details on the city's government relations strategy. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Mr. Long. And upon attending this year's conference, it's actually the first AMO conference I've ever been to. I've done FCM, but never AMO. There's other councillors that have gone to those in the past. So I attended the Cannabis 2021 Regulating Cannabis Growing in Municipalities seminar, which we brought actually our planning staff into council chambers to watch that seminar. I did broadband connectivity in Ontario. The municipal digital transformation building permits in the 21st century. So how to pump out those building permits specifically on smaller type builds where the person doesn't actually have to attend City Hall. They can actually do it online, pay online, they can be issued online. It's actually a quite slick operation. Wainfleet is doing it now. The company that they're using seems to be going okay. They've had a few glitches, but it seems to be going okay. But I know our staff is looking into that for the city of Port Colborne. So it'll not only help our staff, but it'll also help our developers here. And as both the CAO and Mr. Long talked about, we met with Kinga Surma, the Minister of Infrastructure, Mike Harris, who's MPP and Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Natural Resources, We met with the Honorable Carolyn Mulroney, Minister of Transportation, Honorable Lisa MacLeod, Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture, Donna Skelly, MPP from Hamilton. She's the Parliamentary Minister, Assistant to the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, and Jim McDonnell, MPP, who's the Parliamentary Assistant to Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Biggest thing here, especially with PA Donna Skelly and Minister Surma, both were invited to come to Port Colborne, and they do actually work quite close with each other at the legislature. And basically, when we told Minister Surma about Member Skelly coming to Port Colborne and visiting us, she was right on board with that. So that's where Gary went with staff, and we've invited all those that we spoke to invite them to Port Colborne and really go over what we spoke to them about. And there's some things that are coming up in tonight's meeting that touch on those things that we discussed with these ministry departments. So it was actually very good, and we got some really good feedback. Although you get 15 to 20 minutes with each ministry, it does go fly by pretty quick. So we kept to our scripts on a tight basis to make sure that we got all our points across, and then took any questions that they had for us. So thank you, Council. And is there any questions to the three of us? Anything further? Perfect. Thank you. I have Mr. Bowles. He has his hand up for staff remarks. Mr. Bowles.
Thank you. Through the Mayor to Council, just a quick reminder, capital budget at the Budget Committee of the Whole this coming Thursday. I know the document was kind of lengthy. It was 167 pages in total, the capital budget proposal. Any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or the rest of the staff that have been working on the budget. We're happy to take them and in preparation for Thursday's discussion.
Great, thank you. Any other staff members with anything for Council? Seeing none, Councillors' remarks. I'm going to go to Councillor Beauregard first.
I have no remarks at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bruno.
Nothing tonight, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Bodner.
Nothing from me, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Clayliff.
Nothing from me either, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Demarang. She's fine too. Councillor Baggy. You're okay, Councillor?
Actually, I have one issue. I got to break the mold, Mr. Mayor. Sorry.
That's okay.
It didn't happen until 4:30 this afternoon. It was too late to call City Hall. Anyways, maybe we could get some staff on Pleasant Beach Road. Pretty well across from 924 Pleasant Beach Road. They're doing some infilling there with truckloads of fill, and the the northbound lane of the road is just totally covered in mud, and with this rain we just had a few minutes ago, it's going to be really slick tonight. So maybe we could have somebody go out there, take a look at it tomorrow, Mr. Mayor, and notify the parties that to take care of the situation.
Okay, Mr. Kawamoto.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we will take a look at it actually tonight.
Perfect. Thank you.
He's going to go out there himself right after the meeting, right?
I'll be on my way.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one item that came up later today. It's in regards to what is, I would believe, a shift in our bylaw coverage on the beach end roads. I believe we're all saying goodbye to summer, regrettably. And as a result of that, I believe in discussions with Director or Fire Chief Lawson, we have changed our coverage a little bit with regards to bylaw on the end of the beach roads. I was just wondering if Chief Lawson could elaborate a little bit on that.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Chief Lawson?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council. With us saying goodbye to the summer, we said goodbye to our 3 students that we really leaned on to augment our staff over the summer. They took on the brunt of the beach ends and parking. With that said, we still have 2 officers. We always have somebody on duty 7 days a week, and they're working between the hours of 10 and 6. And they are doing regular patrols down on the beach ends, but it is somewhat lower than maybe what residents have been used to, just because of staffing.
Okay. Councillor?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Danch?
No, I got nothing this week. I've been looked after. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I have one item to Mr. Kalamoto. Mr. Kalamoto, remember, stay November 11th. If the Legion is going to go back to the cenotaph, we're not 100% sure yet. But if they do, I know you do have in your powers, you could do a road closure. If we could have Sugarloaf Street closed between Fielden and Elm, if the cenotaph is used again this year, if you could, we'll work together with the Legion on that, but it doesn't have to come to council anymore. We know that your powers, you can do that. So just want to make you aware of that. If they're going to move ahead with it, I'd like to see that road closed this year and allow more parking along both sides, specifically for our seniors.
To you, Mr. Mayor, not a problem. Just let me know and we'll be ready.
Great, thank you. Consideration of items requiring separate discussion. I have item 7.1. That Corporate Services Department Report 2021-233 be received for information. I have Councillors Kalaloff and Bagu moving that, and Councillor Kalaloff, you had a question?
Actually, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Brian and his team, I basically wanted to say some thank yous to you because I was reading over the report and I know it just skims over the surface, but I know all the things that have been going on this summer. And I was thinking about it in retrospect and going back to last summer and how much we've learned. And, you know, if you look at the beaches, and I've heard lots of good comments, there's always the few negatives, but I just wanted to give everybody a big pat on the back because I think that the whole team on all of the things that they put together this summer and the things coming forward, I think that we're in a good place with that. And I just wanted to say thank you. Great work.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions on this item, 7.1? All in favor, please raise your hand. Great, carried unanimously. Item 7.2. That Corporate Services Department Report 2021-239 be received, and that staff be directed to implement a COVID-19 vaccination policy setting out vaccine requirements as outlined in Report 2021-239. I have Councillors Wells and Kalaloff moving that. I'm going to go to Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mary, Director of HR, if possible. Mary, with regards to this the vaccine policy, that is going to be done specifically for city staff. Is that correct?
Ms. Murray?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells, yes, it would apply to staff, volunteers, students, and council would be our recommendation.
Councillor?
And a follow-up from that, there will be no requirement for people or residents that have to access or would like to access City Hall for a vaccination as long as they follow all the COVID regulations of wearing a mask and distancing and so on.
Ms. Murray?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is correct. People that were coming, or residents that are coming into City Hall would just continue to do our screening and adhere to any PPE and social distancing requirements.
Councillor?
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kalaloff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mary. Mary, I just have a question. You know, I'm looking at this and coming from a vaccine background, I just wondered, I was looking at the possibility when I was reading it over, it looks as if we have an event planned and we have children under 12 who wouldn't be vaccinated attending that event, if I were going to that event with my grandchild, I wouldn't be able to attend without being vaccinated. Is that right? If I hadn't received my vaccination?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the policy would only apply to our staff. If we were hosting an event, there would be no vaccine requirements. And so the vaccine passport, which the government is legislating, wouldn't apply to events that we were holding. It would apply to the Valet Health and Wellness Center. And so there's different regulations there, but any events that we're holding, there wouldn't be a vaccine requirement at this point in time.
But so if we were at the Valet Health, if I were taking my grandson to play hockey, I would have to be double vaccinated in order to watch him play hockey?
Ms. Murray?
That is correct.
Right? But you're telling me that staff, if they decide not to be vaccinated, they could be at the Valet working with extra PPE, and they would be allowed to work there. They would be required to be vaccinated. Actual staff in there.
Sorry, so you cut out a little bit, but I think I understood your question. Sorry, it's okay. It's okay. So through you, Mr. Mayor. So the vaccine passport, which is a separate piece of legislation from the government, doesn't require our employees to be vaccinated. Our policy would require our employees to be vaccinated or to follow the additional steps. So if somebody isn't vaccinated, we do have the option to redeploy them to another city work site. So we may not have any unvaccinated staff working at Valet because we do have that ability to redeploy them elsewhere within the city.
I guess my question is that should a child or adult or somebody contract COVID-19, say at the Valet Center, and when they do the research on it, it's traced back to one of our staff, who becomes liable in that situation? Would it be city liable, or would that individual be liable for if there was someone became very ill, or at the very worst we had a death regarding as a result of it? Who is held liable in that situation?
Ms. Murray?
If it's our policy to say that they don't have to be, our staff don't need to be vaccinated. Do you know on the liability piece? I see Brian with your hand up.
Ms. Murray?
Actually, I'll let Brian speak.
Mr. Bowles?
So through the mayor to council, I do think if we're going to have a discussion about the potential liability or such like that, we may want to consult with the clerk to know if we can go in camera to have those conversations.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, we can go into camera if you would like to find more information about the liability. If it doesn't affect the decision tonight, we can bring it forward at a future meeting if you want more details about it.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to council, I think if we want to have a conversation about insurance coverage with respect to COVID-19, staff would appreciate the opportunity to come back with another report with respect to that and consider taking that in camera, given the I think the question of legal liability that's being asked by the councillor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kalaleff?
That would be fine with me.
Great, thank you. Are you have any other questions, Councillor? Okay, Councillor Demeray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I have a couple of questions. One is around third-party, like contracted workers. Would they be held by this policy as well?
Ms. Murray?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So we haven't finalized the scope of the policy. We could include them, but it is hard to dictate what other companies do with their employees. Certainly any third-party contractors that would be coming into our facilities would still be required to do our active screening and to pass that screening and adhere to all of our PPE and our social distancing requirements.
Councillor?
Oh, okay, thank you. Also, moving on to the rapid testing, I see that staff would decide how often this testing would be done, but I really have concerns around how often this should be done, and I'm wondering if maybe the EOC should be weighing in on that, making a recommendation for that, because I think that would really be dependent on what the numbers were like at the time, correct? Would that not change, whether it be weekly or twice a week or bi-weekly, however that is? I think maybe the EOC might be the best body to make recommendation on that. What do you think about that?
Ms. Murray?
Sure. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Certainly EOC provides input into all of these things. And I think you make a valid point, right? Things are changing, and we may say that testing is twice a week, and then we may have to change that as the situation evolves. So the reason why we said it would be up to staff to decide is so that we have that flexibility based on what's occurring and the guidance currently from public health or the government as that changes.
Councillor?
Okay. Okay, so that would be good. I just examining the various aspects of this. But coming to the Valley Center, I'm really glad that Councillor Clayton brought this forward. That one really does concern me because this is a place where the public interacts with all of our staff. And that is a place I think we should be extremely protective. It just makes good sense to have any unvaccinated workers removed from that situation so that we are not putting anyone at risk in a place where they could easily be at risk. It just makes more sense to do the same thing with library, museum, places where the public is going to interact. We welcome the public onto those grounds. We need to have staff that is double vaxxed. That's just my feeling on that. I would like to hear maybe what other councillors have to say about that, but that is definitely my feeling on that. That's everything I had to bring.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I thought pre this meeting I had that in order in my brain, and so much like Councillor Desmarais, I would appreciate that clarification. I'm just wondering if, through you to the Director of HR, if you could explain the then differential from Councillor Wells' question about a member of the public wants to come into City Hall and speak to a staff member. So if you could explain again on each side of that equation, staff and the public, and their need for vaccination or protective, personal protective equipment versus valet, because I think that just needs to be clarified more. Both are having interaction with our staff, notwithstanding valet is open to the public and likely no barrier in between. Don't know if that's the distinction, but Mary, if you could just highlight that for the public.
Ms. Murray?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So there are distinctions, of course, I think, in our facilities in that Valet Health and Wellness Center is going to be covered under the vaccine passport regulations. And that sets very specific requirements for anybody going into that facility. And we are required to adhere to that legislation. In terms of our other facilities, they don't fall under that legislation. So it's up to us to determine what we want to do. And we would continue with our active screening for any citizen, non-employee, so those third-party contractors coming into our facilities would continue to do that active screening. They would need to continue to wear their face covering, hand sanitizing, social distancing. This policy would require our staff to be vaccinated and to disclose to us their vaccination status. Once we have a handle on what staff are vaccinated and not vaccinated, I think we'll be in a better position to say if we need to perhaps redeploy people from certain facilities. And then our staff would, for those that are either not vaccinated, can't be vaccinated, or choose not to disclose their vaccination status, there would be additional measures, which would be that rapid testing or additional PPE.
Councillor?
Just a follow-up then. So that stipulation at Valet, citizens wishing to visit, participate, or watch their children, that portion of the public vaccination requirement does not come into effect until the provincial passport is ready?
Ms. Murray?
Correct. We're waiting for the official regulations to be published, and that will set the dates and the implementation.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see in the report that there's, and I just want clarification, is it the recommendation that the cost of the test is paid by the city rather than the employee? Is that right now as it stands?
Ms. Murray?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, currently right now we are sourcing an option that actually would not cost anything. We do believe we have a very small number of staff that are not vaccinated. We do have some policies in place that may obligate us to pay for the testing, so we're still working through some of those nuances.
Councillor?
Okay, I think the employees should be paying for those tests. But if you're saying that it's being looked at, so what are we doing tonight? Are we passing this and this is the way it stands? Or is this still a work in progress and the final policy will come to us at some future time?
I'm going to go to the CAO on this.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Bodner, I appreciate the question, and I'm going to jump ahead of Mary, who prepared the report, and Brian, who she reports to directly, if that's okay, and sort of talk about staff, city management, and the city's control group working together on getting to this stage. If you remember at our last meeting, I said we're a long ways off. I don't think I said a long ways off. I said we're a ways off from a vaccine policy, and here we are the very next meeting talking about a vaccine policy. It's not that there's a sense of urgency, but we are talking about this almost every single day, whether it's the control group, whether it's management, whether it's one-on-one for Mary and I. And our idea was to bring this recommendation that staff be directed today to develop and implement a policy. Now that means not bringing it back to council, but council could make an amendment that you want to see this at the next meeting before you approve a draft policy. We don't have a draft policy to put in front of you this evening. What we do have, we're very close to having one. What we do have is all of the different considerations that Mary put in this report. So the things like who's going to pay for the cost of the test and so on. And our vision was that council would discuss it and maybe through amendments to this report, give direction to Mary on what you would like to see in the report so that she can go back to work the next day and write that policy, what you want to see in the policy. So you could make an amendment that staff be directed to pay the cost of a test, if any. And if they're free, they won't have to. But because of your amendment, they would have to if there is a cost. You could make an amendment that workers in the Health and Wellness Center have to be vaccinated, that there isn't an alternative to vaccination, whereas the recommendation of staff that's before you today is that there's an alternative to being vaccinated. So the policy ideas that Mary has in the report are her recommendations based on what we would like to implement as staff, but we will absolutely follow council's direction if you would like to see certain particulars taken out of the policy or certain particulars entered into the policy. So we were hoping to have that discussion right now, and then Mary will have her marching orders.
Councillor Bodner.
Sure. Well, I'd like to see staff pay for the testing. I don't know how other councillors feel, but I guess I'll put that forward as something to be put into the policy.
Okay. Seconder to that is Councillor Clayliff. So is to add the fact that if there is a cost, that staff is responsible to pay that cost.
I don't think Councillor Clayliff wants to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, okay. Sarah put her hand up.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to bring up the point that
Well,
there's always
Councillor, I've got a motion on an amendment on the floor. I'm going to take that first. So, were you going to second that for Councillor Bodner or no?
Second it, but I wanted to maybe just change it a little, tweak it.
Yeah, I'll come back to you. That's fine. I just need a mover and a seconder.
Okay.
So you're okay to second it?
All right.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So I've got a mover and a seconder. Councillor Bodner, it's your motion. I'll let you speak first.
Sure. I don't know as much speaking on it. I'm okay with it. If there is a chance for a free test, that would be fabulous. And I'll just wait to hear what other councillors have to say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Clayliff.
No. I guess I just wanted to add the fact that with any vaccine, there's always going to be some people who cannot take it medically. And if you're medically certified by a doctor that you can't take that vaccine, I don't think it's fair for us to say that you should have to pay it. I think it should be people who are making a conscientious decision to not take the vaccine for their own personal reasons. I agree, they should be paying for the tests themselves. But I'm not sure if everyone agrees with that, but I think that if you have a reason that you cannot take it, substantiated by a doctor's letter, then I think that we should be responsible for paying for it.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Murray, can you put some light on that one, please?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council. I would agree with that. The general consensus amongst what I'm seeing with these policies that are being implemented is if that somebody has a bona fide medical or human rights code exemption, their employer is covering the cost of the testing.
Great, thank you. Okay, Councillor Clayhoff. Councillor, some of you guys had your yellow hands up prior to this amendment. Is there anybody with their hand up that doesn't want to ask a question? Take your hand down. If not, then I'll just go through the list here. Okay, I'm going to start with Councillor Beauregard.
Thank you. Through your worship to Ms. Murray. Well, first, I just would like to say that I do agree in principle with the amendment. However, I'm concerned about whether or not there will be, if we can even do this without having some issues with unions or some other aspects. So maybe through your worship to Ms. Murray, like, can we proceed in this direction without there being some type of issues, or is this something that, without going too deep into a point where we need to go into a closed session, what can you tell us about that?
Ms. Murray?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. These policies are being implemented across the country, and based on the conversations that I've had with colleagues and of course with legal representation, I think that we are in a good position and that we can implement a policy with testing.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bruno?
Yes, to the motion. I'd like to know through you to Director of Human Resources with respect to the employee being able, if it was a pay situation, does the employee and does the municipality work on whether the person could be redeployed if they're currently in a public touch position? So the policy becomes pay. Can the employee opt to work in a non-touch situation?
Ms. Murray?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, yes, that is an option. We do have the ability and the right to redeploy people in these situations. And so if that was the case, then certainly that is a viable option.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I did have another motion to put forward, but just to Councillor Bruno's point for a minute, I do absolutely believe that anyone choosing not to take the vaccination should have to pay for the testing, whether they're interacting with the public or not. They're still employees of the city and they need to be doing that. They can choose to work in another location, but they still need to be doing that. That's really very important. But that's just how I'm seeing it. That seems to be how the policy is written as well, if I'm correct.
Ms. Murray?
Sorry, could you repeat your question? My headphones cut out.
Oh, okay, sorry. The way I read the policy, any of our employees that choose not to take the vaccination and don't have any medical exemption or human rights exemption must be tested at their own cost, and however number of tests that are chosen to have. But there's no way out of that. Just deciding to move to a different workplace or a different work location should not excuse them from that. They should still have to do that. Correct?
Yes. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, yes, that would be correct. There is no option to get out of the testing.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. I just wanted to be clear on that one. But the motion I had wanted to add to this, the amendment rather I wanted to add to this was that any of the city staff working at the Valley Health and Wellness Center, the library, the museum, the marina, or the front counter at City Hall, these are places where we would regularly interact with the public, must be double vaxxed. Otherwise, they should be working in a different location.
So Councillor, I'm going to do this amendment first, then I'll come to you for that one, please. Thank you. Great, thank you. You're all set? I'll come back to you.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bagu.
Just a point of order, Mr. Mayor. I want to talk about the original one still, the original motion. Do I got to wait for?
You have to wait for the amendment.
10 minutes or?
Yep, you have to wait till this is passed or failed, and then we'll be back to the motion as amended or not amended. Okay?
Okay. I would like to speak to Councilor Demaray's motion.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wells.
It was a question for the original amendment or original motion, so just move on.
Okay.
And I'll get back to it.
Thanks, Councillor. Any further questions on Councillor Bodner's amendment? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Opposed? That is carried. So, okay, so the motion has now been amended. I'm going to go to Councillor Demaray because she has an amendment. Councillor Demaray, do you want to put your amendment on the floor, please?
Okay, thank you. And that would be that we add that all of our staff that work at the Valley Health and Wellness Center, the library, the museum, the marina, and the City Hall's front counter, these are all positions where we are regularly interacting with the public, that all of those people be double vaxxed.
Okay, seconder for that? Councillor Bodner will second that. Questions? I know Councillor Bagu had a question to that. Councillor Bagu on this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question regarding that motion. Does this also include the YMCA employees plus the Subway little restaurant employees or anybody else that goes in there, like a cleaner or contractor?
Ms. Murray? Ms. Murray, can you deal with that one?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of like Y staff, they would be covered under the Y's own policy. In terms of staff of the restaurant or whatnot, the marina, again, they're not our employees. So they would be covered under the policies of their own employers. Yeah, if our policy, if we're looking at adding an amendment like this to our policy, I would just caution that this policy speaks only to our employees and not to sort of those third-party people.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. I have Councillor Wells, then Councillor Bruno. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to the amendment is very specific to which employees we have. I think that if we could generalize it maybe a little bit by including all city employees that have direct contact with the public, rather than to being specific. For example, bylaw have a lot of interaction with public. They should probably be included in that specific. So rather than naming all of them, can we just generalize that?
I'm going to go to Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk.
Through the chair, I don't know if you want to include something if legal advises that this is acceptable. I do just want to point out that almost every staff in City Hall has an opportunity to deal with the public, depending on if they have questions about water, tax, commissioning, marriage licenses, planning, so many different items.
Okay, Councillor Wells?
That's fine. I was just trying to make it a little bit simpler.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Director Bowles had his hand up. Before I go to Councillor Bruno, I'm going to go to Director Bowles.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and through the Mayor to Council. So when we were putting this policy together and this report together, there was a lot of discussion whether to be in camera or not in camera with respect to the labor issue. Given the importance of the issue, we brought it forward and not in camera. But there are some questions that I think get raised with the motion that may be better addressed in camera with respect to certain labor issues that we may be stumbling across, specifically when we do think about the Vale Health and Wellness Center. I do realize the spirit there, given the provincial government's regulations that came out, whereas those regulations may not apply at some of these other locations. And with respect to, I think what our clerk has said, the number of other individuals and every individual having direct contact with the community or potential for direct contact. So I might ask the CAO or the clerk just to see how to proceed, because I think our manager of HR might have some additional comments to provide to council before voting on that motion that would, I think, restrict who can work where further.
I'm going to go to the CAO.
Sure. Through your worship to council and following up on Director Bowles' comments, I think we're sort of walking a fine line between talking about legal issues, and I can't, as staff, and none of the staff here and council members can expose us to legal liability by, sort of taking on some kind of liability. Earlier the question was asked, who would be liable if something happened? And likewise, we don't really want to, sometimes we're negotiating with our labor partners, CUPE and the fire union and the unions that the city deals with, and we don't want to talk about our bargaining position in an open council meeting. But we do want to get some direction on how to write this policy. So I maybe would suggest to council through the mayor that we do have an HR closed session update planned for next meeting, the 27th of September. We could take away the legal questions that are being asked here tonight, bring back answers on the 27th, but in the meantime, work on a final draft copy of the policy based on what we can discuss in open session. So if we get the direction from council on what council would like to see written into the policy, we can bring that policy forward on the 27th based on a closed session discussion that will take place on the 27th. And then I think that's the best of both worlds.
Okay, I agree. So council, I'm going to park that amendment right now. Councillor Desmarais, we'll give it as direction to staff so that when they come back at our next meeting, they can talk about any ramifications further than what we're doing here tonight. And then I'll also take, as opposed to other amendments, I think the first amendment we did is something that's across the board anyways. I'm getting it in my work, in my business life, where companies are making their staff pay for a test if they're not vaccinated. So that's been looked after, but let's take everything else as direction to Ms. Murray to take back. Anything that needs to be discussed under in camera at our next meeting, she could bring that to us, and then we can deal with the final policy at that time. If that's okay with council. Is there any other direction as opposed to amendments that we want to give to staff? Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm between whether it's, yes, it's direction. I'll spew out what my thinking was. The first question of the night on this was, or for the first comment by the CAO to Councillor Bodner's question, I believe, is that for us to come up with ideas that we'd like to see in policy. My concern is that we could do all that, and in the meantime, we don't meet till the 27th. The province's rules come out, I believe, or they're out on the 20th, but there's enforcement. There may be legal challenges that get some sort of hearing at one level of court or the other. And so I would be happy if we were still going to discuss policy directions and vote on them. I'd just like it understood that staff could rewrite, rearrange, or nix that if there is intervening action by the province, the courts, etc. But what I don't want to see is that we direct a policy and somewhere between now and September 27th, there's an entity that precludes our direction. And just that it's understood that the direction will be in lack of other direction, the province or the courts. I don't know if I phrased that right, or maybe Ms. Murray could comment on that. I just don't want to be offside with that. And some other community that has a council meeting in between now and then changes it, the province changes it back. I guess I want clarity for the public, particularly if people were visiting our community or vice versa. So I don't know if you could comment on intervening actions by orders of government above us and the courts.
Well, like anything else, Council, those would supersede any rules that we put in. So if we put something in and the province said you can't do that, or a court said you can't do that, it would automatically be removed from our policy. I would think, because that's standard with moving along. It's no different than the mask bylaw that the region passed, where the province came out with their own. That superseded the region's mask bylaw, so the rules under the province superseded that. So really, it became null and void at the local level until the province decided to remove theirs, and the region has to make a decision whether to keep theirs or not. So, Ms. Murray, do you want to comment on that?
Could I just add, Mr. Mayor, would that be the same thing with the union challenge?
Ms. Murray?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I think as we see various challenges that arise to all of these different policies across the country, any legal actions, grievances, and whatnot, those will take time to work their way through their respective systems. And I think as we've had to do throughout the duration of this pandemic, we're going to need to be prepared to sort of modify and pivot and change things as these challenges come up and are resolved. And I think that's just what we're going to need to continue to do with this policy.
Very good. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I could make this a lot easier for everyone to just withdraw the amendment. What I really want to do here is, first of all, not let this go past tonight. I want to see us move on this tonight so this thing can start happening. But I just want to make sure that we're being as protective as absolutely possible of each other and of the public in general. I don't want to be allowing situations to exist that put people at risk. So that's what I had intended by, talking about people who have a lot of interaction with the public and with each other. If you're working in any close confine, it's going to be an issue. So I would just trust that staff will keep that on the radar and make the right decisions around that and withdraw the amendment that I had put forward. But I would like to see this policy be put into effect tonight.
Yes, if we can allow that to go to Mary and have her wordsmith it, I guess, because I know Councillor Wells added something that might have been maybe a little bit easier, but let Mary look after that so that when the actual policy is written, it's, I suppose, written properly, I guess, so that we don't leave anything out and staff doesn't leave anything out. I think Ms. Murray has an idea of what the council is looking at here, so I think she can move that forward. Is that all right, Councillor?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay. I've got Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. First, a question about the original motion, and maybe the CAO. What is the Niagara region government heading towards? Have they made a policy yet or a proposal?
Through your worship to Councillor Bagu, I do see someone shaking their head on the screen, but I've got information in my email today, 3 emails from the HR department at the region, that their policy is implemented, is approved. They approved it based on council direction at the staff level. The policy did not go back to council. Their policy is a fair bit more strict than what our staff are proposing to our council. Specifically, everyone has to be vaccinated or have one of those exemptions. And if they're not vaccinated, they're subject to discipline up to and including termination. They're employees. If I'm saying this in my own words now, if working in a different location is not an option, because every worker who's working remotely has to be available to report to their primary work location, and if they're not vaccinated, they're not available, because the requirement for their workplace is going to be mandatory vaccination. We've always taken the approach that we're not holding down employees and putting a needle in their arm. We're offering a way to administer our workplace. So what you have before you is not as strict as that policy. That policy goes into effect the vaccine requirement is effective the same day as the province's vaccine passport, which is September 22nd. And like I said, as far as I know, that is an adopted policy.
Counselor?
Okay, thank you, Mr. CEO. And I imagine every city, every council in Niagara region is going through the exact same thing what we're just going through right now. So basically, you want direction for Mary. My personal direction as a councilor is the same as the regions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was probably one of the ones who was shaking my head because as of this morning, I understood that the region had not implemented their policy yet. The other thing I wanted to make perfectly clear, it's my understanding that we do not have a policy in front of us to approve at this point in time. We are, the discussion has been around allowing a policy to be developed by staff that we could implement as soon as possible. So I just wanted to make sure my understanding was correct, that we do not have a policy in front of us tonight.
You're correct, Councillor. So what staff is looking for is that we pass the report that's in front of us, that we receive it, and that staff be directed to implement COVID vaccination policy. So with the one amendment and the other suggestions that have been brought forward, the direction that Mary can go back and develop that and then have it implemented. So, but they'll come back to our next meeting and really take care of the in-camera items that come out of this, that they'll deal with that at the in-camera meeting on our next meeting. Is that all right, Councillor Wells?
Perfectly, that was my understanding. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Clayliff. Is that okay, Scott, that she's going to come back with it?
Through Mr. Mayor to Council. I just want to say that I actually agree with Councillor Bagu, and I think that we should be mimicking the region's policies.
Okay, staff have any comments on that? Ms. Murray?
Yeah, I think we can take all of the feedback from council today and take it back and work on the policy.
Okay. All right, Council. Councillor Bruno.
Through you to Mary, I think the question, if I'm not putting words in Councillor Kalaliff's mouth, was, it could said another way, is there anything you see a reason for our council to adopt its own policy versus what the region has? I'm very concerned that one of the things you hear most from the public is this patchwork quilt of different rules in different municipalities. I don't know if the mayor or the CAO could speak to this in the meeting, but I doubt that with 31 councillors and everybody throwing points at the, much like we do, at the CAO and staff at the region, that they've had a team of lawyers, HR experts, research on other communities, looking at that. I doubt it was necessarily a group think on part of all councillors. So I'm just wondering if there's anything you see our made in Port Colborne solution as being a better route to go than what the region has done. That's a very loaded question, you not knowing everything that's probably in that regional report. But is there a reason to have a made in Port Colborne solution?
Ms. Murray? Or sorry, CAO?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bruno. I know it is a bit unorthodox, and this goes back to Councillor Wells and Councillor Kalaliff's comments too. It's a bit unorthodox. We're asking you to sort of approve a policy that you haven't really seen based on information from other municipalities and so on. But I can assure you this is very similar to the process that unfolded at the region. I would defer to the mayor's knowledge of that. It started at the regional level with a regional councillor's motion to put the policy in place. Staff went back and wrote that policy, and put that policy in place without bringing it back to council, as far as I know. Since then, all of the CAOs of all of the municipalities in Niagara have been talking with the regional CAO and bringing forward policy wording or staff reports of this type, the type that's before you today. And it has been a mixed bag. About your comment about consistency is true. It has been a mixed bag. There are municipalities that have voted down this report and will not have a policy. There is a municipality in Niagara that did their policy at the management level and did not bring it to council for approval. They implemented it as a management policy, not a council city policy. And there are other municipalities that will pass exactly what the region passed, which is a touch stricter than what we're proposing. And to answer your question, I think the difference, I think the made in Niagara or Port Colborne solution is the fact that we have had very good labor relations with our staff throughout the pandemic. Some may have been better, but I know some have not been as good as us at other workplaces, including municipal workplaces. I'd like to maintain the collegial relations with the union leadership and the staff that they represent by working together on this policy, which I think will suit both parties. We've got a very good workplace experience, a very, 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 I can't even say how small it is, number of cases in our workplace and zero spread within the workplace. The cases that we have had were not spread internally. And that's a testament to our policies and practices and precautions so far, and another reason for a made in Port Colborne solution. So these are the reasons I support the type of policy and the policy direction that's ahead of you. I would like to get approval today of this staff report with the sort of direction to Mary to strengthen something or lessen something or loosen something and bring it forward to that closed session of council for council's review next and legal advice. And when we do get legal advice, the subject matter qualifies, I should say, for a closed session, and that's okay to do. And I think that's the best way to proceed with that sort of made in Port Colborne solution, to use your words, Councillor Bruno.
Councillor?
Yes, I'm just a bit concerned. Maybe you could give me some clarity on this. It's probably best directed to the CAO and the clerk. So right now, the regional policy would then fall in line with the provincial rules coming into effect on the passport on the 20th. Our next meeting isn't until the 27th. So for 2 weeks, we will have no now formalized policy, just doing what we're doing, correct? It's question one.
CAO?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bruno, it's a great question. I would like to clarify that there's really not a sense of urgency or a tight timeline that we're on. The vaccine policy and the provincial vaccine passport requirement are related, but they're almost parallel. That is, they don't cross over tracks. And what I mean is the provincial vaccine policy identifies certain facilities that people need to have 2 vaccination doses to be able to enter, whether it's restaurants, movies, amusement parks, and our arena. Our arena is absolutely picked up in that legislation. The vaccine policy proposal that's before council today is simply how we will administer a workplace in which some of the employees are vaccinated once, some are vaccinated twice, and some aren't vaccinated at all. And of that group that's not vaccinated, there's a component that chose not to be vaccinated, and there's a component that can't be vaccinated for whatever reason, and will have to demonstrate that reason, and it will have to meet, the sort of smell test of if it's a valid reason. So a little bit related, but definitely no sense of urgency. We can implement our policy October 15th, October 31st, December 31st, because it's unrelated to the September 22nd legislation.
Just 2 more, if I could, Mr. Mayor. One, to your point, Mr. CAO. So if we have legal advice provided to us, so if we reconvene on the 27th, not before, we have a policy in front of us, will the in-camera meeting for the legal advice be prior to the meeting? And I say that because if there's something that comes out of there that we want to adopt, so the 27th doesn't become whatever that is in October, and this drags on again. So I would like to, if I were to go that way, clear it up on the 27th. I'm still undecided till I hear from some other counselors, but I wouldn't want to come out of the 27th in public session, go to closed session at the end of the evening, depending on how long that meeting is, and have no public either available or tuning back in to hear that debate or policy. So could I be assured that that legal advice be presented to us prior to the meeting of the 27th?
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, we can arrange to have a closed meeting at the beginning of the meeting prior to open, but I am confident tonight if the report is passed, it is very general, it endorses implementation of the vaccine policy with broad outlines, that any direction given in closed would not change this recommendation and could go forward without going to open.
Counselor?
Thank you. And lastly then, so with respect to those issues at Vail, i.e. minor hockey, i.e. parents visiting, that whole interaction, that's going to have effectively nothing to do with our later decision, with the caveat that it is about the provincial rules of people entering that building having to be vaccinated, because that is not Port Colborne centric, that is provincial centric. To you or Mary?
CAO?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bruno, and with Brian's permission, I'll answer. I have talked to the other CAOs in Niagara. There is a consistent, finally for once, a consistent application of the province's rules across the board in Niagara vis-a-vis arenas and people who are aged 13 to 17. That is the group that's affected by the provincial rule. It is absolutely a provincial decision. It is not a city decision. The province is requiring youth sport participants or anyone who's in the arena to be vaccinated. So that includes men's league hockey, adults, women's hockey, and so on. There's a asterisk in the media release. We haven't seen the regulations yet for provincial hockey that allows an exemption for people aged 13 to 17, but the associations that operate the sports are requiring 2 vaccines. They are not, nobody knows what the exemption is. It could be a time exemption where people have a little bit longer to get vaccinated, but these are all provincial rules and they will be enforced equally across jurisdictions in Niagara.
Councillor?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll let other councillors speak.
Yeah, just to clarify, Councillor Bruno, the rules that we're putting in place tonight, they're totally aside from the passport issue. We're here just for our staff. So whether you have 13 different vaccination policies across Niagara doesn't affect the public. This only affects our staff or regional staff or Lincoln or Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, and so on. So if a family comes in from out of town to use our facilities, that becomes the provincial rules. This is strictly for our staff and our council only, which is the same what the region did. So the region passed the staff and regional councillors. Those policies are in place for all those entities, but they have no bearing on what the province comes in with regards to facilities. Now, I don't believe the region operates any facilities that the passport would come into play. It's municipalities that run libraries, museums, and sporting venues and things like that. So we can have a maid in Port Colborne, and it doesn't muddy the waters when somebody comes in because, as I said, it's staff and council. Okay, council?
I guess I would just say that indirectly it does, right? To Amber's comment, the clerk's comment about staff can be in touch with individuals on a individual basis. So there is still part of that that's absent of the provincial rules, correct?
Yes, but I think Ms. Murray outlined that very well, where our staff would look at moving people around that weren't dealing with the public up front, specifically at the Valley Health and Wellness Center, that they could be moved to a separate location so that our senior staff would make sure that the staff that works out of that facility were all vaccinated. I mean, that is part of this policy that Ms. Murray talked about, and I think Councillor Desmarais brought that up with her direction to staff. So I think staff has that, so that specifically with that location, because that is touched on by the provincial policies, the fact that if we have 6 workers there, that we would want all 6 to be vaccinated, and if of the 6 one wasn't, we could move them somewhere else to another position and move in a vaccinated person if you needed all 6. So that gives staff the room to do that, and as you say, make everything safe.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Clayliff?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'm a bit confused. I'm not sure when this pandemic that we're in the midst of became a labor issue versus a medical issue. Everyone's being encouraged across this country to be double vaccinated. We're being prevented from doing things unless we are. We have the most fabulous uptake that I've ever seen in my career, and it's very proud of it. And I think that people that choose not to be vaccinated for conscientious reasons have to be accountable for those decisions. And I think our staff are wonderful. I'm not against anyone not be given that choice, to make that choice to not be vaccinated, but with it comes an accountability. And that's what I'm not understanding here, why all of a sudden we're worried about labor issues and about negotiations. It's very simple. You just said yourself, oh, we can move people around. Well, that's going to cause internal issues, because when you start moving staff, because some staff are vaccinated and some aren't, you're going to have very upset staff if somebody gets bumped out of a job so that somebody else can go into it that's not vaccinated. So I think we're making it complicated. It's very clear and simple. It's coming down hard and heavy. We're into the 4th wave, and you have to really look at the numbers, the stats. I've been following them very closely, and it's people who aren't vaccinated that are spreading it. And if we want to stop it, we need to get vaccinated. So I'm all 100% in favor of people who aren't able to be vaccinated and can prove it. That's fine by me. We accommodate them. We make sure that they're protected, the same as we used to do the other way around. We used to protect children who weren't vaccinated when parents didn't want them done. But now we're in a different situation. And now it's a case of we need to protect for the good of everybody. And so I feel very strongly that we just need to be going straight forward with a mandatory vaccination program in the region. Thank you.
CAO?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Clayliff, I'm not very sure that there's a question there, more of a statement and an opinion, and I appreciate that. I do want to share with Council, since you put the ball on the tee, and I'll take the chance to hit it. We have a very, very high vaccination rate. We've conducted some internal surveying. We know that we're in the 90% range, or 90 to 95% range for employees being double vaccinated. I can report with their permission that everyone on council is double vaccinated. They've taken that leadership step in our community. If not every single person of the senior leadership team, at least 9 out of 10 are double vaccinated at the city. And as I said, more than 90% of our city staff. Our legal advice is that this is a public health emergency, and while we probably couldn't put policies in place for the flu vaccine or some other vaccines, we absolutely have a defendable position if there's a legal challenge from a resident based on our city policies, or a legal challenge, a labor challenge from our staff, be it union or non-union, that we are on solid legal ground to require, to put in place the policies that we have. So Councillor Clayliff's words ring true.
Thank you. Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarification, if we do vote for this policy, making a policy and they keep it status quo, the security guard that we hire to go to the valet center and check everybody's vaccination certification doesn't have to be vaccinated. Like, it does not make sense whatsoever. And can you verify that, Mary or CAO?
Ms. Murray?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I have not yet seen those regulations. As the CAO said, they haven't been published yet. Those regulations may require that a security guard coming into valet to work from an external company be vaccinated. But until we see that regulation, I can't say for certain what it's going to say, but that may be a requirement under the regulation.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. I was just considering him a contractor or a third party, just like the YMCA employees, plus the subway employees, plus any cleaning staff coming in. So I'd really like to, through the CAO or the Madam Clerk, is to somehow make a motion to have everybody double vaccinated as per Niagara Region policy. Because if I vote for this policy right now, it will never be double vaccinated. It would just be what staff recommends, and that we do it. So if that's true, we're giving the power to staff to make the policy, but I can't get a double vaccination policy the council to vote on.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, I through the mayor to council, appreciate the discussions and the comments, and maybe to put some more on the table is our manager of HR, Mary's done a tremendous job consulting with other municipalities, including the Niagara region. And there is one difference. Our policy that we're working on developing actually has only one difference, really, in any substantial manner between Port Colborne's and the Niagara regions. And it would be our preference to discuss that one difference in camera, and we can do that, I think, as the CAO did next week. And if we were to give council any recommendation, similar to what staff did at the Niagara region, staff brought forward a report that asked council, are you interested in a vaccination policy that makes it mandatory? And council at the Niagara region said, yes, we are. And that's what staff here have done today. We've come back to council and asked council, are you interested in a mandatory vaccination policy? And the reality is, even the Niagara region's mandatory vaccination policy still allows people not to be vaccinated. Because if they're not vaccinated, the items that our manager of HR has outlined as items that we'd be putting forward to in a policy as a staff implemented policy are the same in many material respects. So I guess I just put forward as I think some extra commentary for council to consider because I know that you haven't seen the Niagara region's policy, and to be fair to maybe Mary and myself, we haven't seen the final one, and just to let council know at this point in time either. It was great to hear from the CAO that it may be final. It was draft last we knew going into this meeting. But as you go to make your decision, I think the report that's in front of you, just for clarity, is to direct staff to work on a policy like we do on other HR policies, like the region did to their council, and to come back and indicate to council what that policy would be. We do have one difference, again, I'll just remind council, and we'd be happy to discuss it in a confidential meeting, I think at next meeting where the CAO has identified.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. So Councillor Baggy, can you hang on to that until that meeting? Because we are meeting prior to council, and let our staff read the entire policy that's coming forth through staff at the region, and then they can probably give you a better answer at that time. And if it's not to your liking, you can, in open session, obviously add that after the in-camera session next meeting. Only because you may be doing something that they're already going to be doing. So why don't we let them get that together and bring that forward to you? We can have them look into that and compare how they feel we should move forward here in Port Colborne as compared to the region. As Mr. Bowles stated, it could be identical or there could be some caveats that are different, but let's allow them to bring those back so that they have everything correct in that manner, so they can get the policy that's been put together by staff at the region that quite frankly wasn't 100% completed that night, but took all the direction from council, the region, and they are implementing that now. So if we could allow them to do that, I think that gives you lots of time and staff lots of time to put that together, and that can always be added after that in-camera meeting. Is that all right?
That's very good. Thank you very much for that clarification to everybody involved. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Your Worship. So those provincial regulations come into effect, is it on the 20th or the 22nd?
CAO?
Through your worship to council, September 22nd, 2-2.
Okay, so to Councillor Clayton's point and Councillor Baggio's point, we have a public health emergency. We have a regulation coming in on the 22nd. And without reading the regulations, without meeting before the 22nd, I'm of the understanding that there is a potential that we would have a security guard unvaccinated doing our work to check people vaccinated at the front door of the Vail Center. Is that correct? Mary?
Ms. Murray?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the intention was to hire security to have them sit there and verify the vaccination status once that regulation comes into effect. Again, because we haven't seen the regulations, we may be able to use those regulations to require that those security guards are vaccinated. But until they're published, we can't say for sure.
Okay. So through you to Mr. Bowles. Given the seriousness of this issue, the issue for which you described the CAO and you could speak to, if we were to have a motion to go in camera, would you be able to bring the clarity you would like to the issue? Would you be able to do that if that was tonight?
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to council. Maybe I'll look for our manager of HR to also shake her head, but I believe that we could provide some clarity to help council move forward with this in a timely manner tonight.
Thank you. So my concern is we could still be ahead of the provincial rules, still not worry about the regulations for our public going into the Vail Health and Wellness Center. If we, went into camera now and see if we could get clarity to make a decision. And barring that, B, we could always meet for just this item before the 22nd. And I think we would have done our duty to the citizens and the public interfacing with our employees. So I would like to move that we go in camera to discuss this issue. Do I need a seconder, Mr. Mayor?
I'm going to take a 5-minute recess. The clerk needs to pull up the proper wording, so we'll take a 5-minute recess and come back.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, councilors, we're back here. So I'm going to go to Councilor Bruno to move that at 8:07, we move that item 7.2, that Corporate Services Department Report 2021-239, be put on the floor pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Councilor Bruno to move. Do I have a seconder? Councilor Bodnar. All those in favor to go in camera, please raise your hand. That's carried. So we're going to take 15 minutes, Council. Madam Deputy Clerk, you're going to send everybody the Zoom in-camera connection. So you're going to have to get out of this, guys, and then go into the email that you're going to receive in a minute and go back and then we'll go in camera. And to the public that's watching, once we come out of camera, we'll be back in public and we'll resume here. Thank you. Okay, so now we're back in open session. There were no disclosures of interest arising from closed session. Madam Clerk?
So discussion happened in accordance with the Municipal Act tonight, and no direction was given.
Great, thank you. Okay, Council, we are still on item 7.2, that Corporate Services Department Report 2021-239 be received. The staff be directed to implement a COVID-19 vaccination policy setting out vaccine requirements as outlined in Report 2021-239. We've had lots of discussion. Is there any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Council. Item 7.3, that Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-228 be received. The Council approves the following road closures for the downtown cruise nights on Thursday, September 23rd and Thursday, September 30th. Clarence Street from the western limit of King Street to the eastern limit of Catherine Street, and Catherine Street from the southern limit of Clarence Street to the northern limit of Charlotte Street. I have Councillors Wells and Kalaloff moving that. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's more a comment than a question. I think this is very important that we start to reopen the city, start to do things. I think there is ample precautions being put in place by the BIA as well as the cruisers with regards to enforcing or ensuring that there's proper distancing and proper precautions are taken. So I think it's very important that we look at this and start to open up a bit more. I understand the issue that numbers are rising, but I think, as we've heard earlier, that we in Port Colborne have had a fairly good resistance to our numbers climbing. So I think it's important that we support this initiative for the cruise night and the Harbor Fest. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kalaloff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if this goes to Luke, or I just have a question regarding the washrooms. I see that they're going to have the down by the canal, the Harbor Master house open, but there's only one washroom there, and that doesn't seem adequate. I had asked a couple meetings ago regarding opening up City Hall washrooms, and there was supposed to be a report coming back or something to talk to us about when that would happen or if it could happen. The BIA had volunteered to have their own staff there to monitor them. I just look at the situation of both the cruise nights and the Harvest Festival going on, and lots of little kids around, and we're going to be so short of washrooms, it's not funny. So I think we either need to hopefully open City Hall washrooms and have them monitored, or can we perhaps, Council, could we support the BIA and bring in some portable washrooms for them?
Mr. Rowe?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kalaloff. So I did not get a request from the BIA to open our City Hall's washrooms for Harvest Fest. However, I was chatting with Mary Lou, and she had mentioned that they are going to bring in 2 portable toilets, one accessible and one regular for Harvest Fest.
Councillor?
And what about the cruise nights? Because those nights as well, they need washrooms as well, Luke. A lot of the businesses aren't allowing. Some of them are allowing washrooms to be used, but they're sending everybody down to the Harbor Master's house, and it's just there's either a lineup or sometimes there's people in there that stay a long time, and it could be a real jam up of people. I'm just concerned about that.
Mr. Rowe?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I haven't received a request from them for portable washrooms for the cruise nights, but it is something that we could potentially provide, and I can discuss it more with Mr. Spiteri and Mary Lou.
That would be great. I really appreciate that, because I know that at least from the BIA, they're watching their pennies, but I know that they had talked about it and they were very concerned about washrooms.
Yes.
So, and I'm sure cruise people would appreciate it as well. So at least if we're proactive and we make the offer and see what happens. Thank you.
Because traditionally, Councillor, the city hall isn't open on cruise nights, and nor have we ever supplied the portable washrooms. So it has operated over a number of years without that. I know the Harbour Master House has always been available at that time. I know a lot of patrons patronize the restaurants and shops downtown also, but those have never been offered by the city, so that's probably why they've never asked, because they've never had to have that in the past.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, I guess I'm looking at the fact for the last couple of years, there have been portable washrooms at the marketplace, even though we haven't had cruise nights, so I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I guess I just think it'd be a good thing to,
Yep.
and if they don't need it, they don't need it. Great.
Yep. So we'll let Mr. Rowe talk to Mr. Spiteri and see where he wants to go from there. Okay?
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Item 8.1 is correspondence from the City of St. Catharines with regards to a marine policy. I'm going to call on Councillor Wells to move that and Councillor Caleff to second it. Councillor Wells, do you want to speak on this?
Thank you, Your Worship. We in Port Colborne here could utilize that strategy, could get the benefits from that comprehensive marine strategy and utilize those benefits to our best advantage with the focus that we have in regards to our marine heritage and the welcoming center for cruise ships and everything else on that line. So I think we need to do more than just to receive this report. I think we need to get behind it, support it, because we need it more so than even St. Catharines, because we have a smaller base, business base, and our base is more aligned toward marine anyway. Our focus is more aligned toward the marine strategy. So I think we need to support that and make a resolution to support it.
Okay, I'll take that as a motion to support as opposed to receive. Councillor Caleff, are you all right seconding that still?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just had a question regarding it. It was very generalized, and I agree with everything Councillor Wells said. I guess I was just looking at the fact, you know, they talk about marine lands being leased and sold. Is it involved? Are they speaking to the HOPA piece in this? Because
no, this is a marine strategy that the province would put together, very similar to what Quebec has done, and also the federal marine strategy. So it's not to any specific company, but it's an actual marine strategy across Ontario, which basically covers all the Great Lakes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Long, do you want to add to this, please?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council. I can mention that that our Economic Development Officer and I actually discussed St. Catharines' motion last week. It is our intention to bring a report to Council at your September 27th meeting. Council has the option tonight of adopting and supporting St. Catharines' motion. In fact, staff would recommend that. We do support St. Catharines' motion. But I think we feel it would be advantageous for the city to have our own report, to have our own motion. While the St. Catharines motion is very detailed and comprehensive, we feel that we should be on record for what is really important to us. There's no mention in the St. Catharines motion around sort of port rehabilitation, port investment as sort of being key economic drivers and so on. There's nothing in the motion regarding the cruise ship sector, and again, being another economic and tourist driver for our city. So those would be a couple of things that I think we want to include in a future motion from this council. I think it's important to note that Port Colborne has already been very active on this file in terms of advocating for a marine strategy at the provincial level. At the recent AMO conference, our delegation raised the issue of Ontario having its own marine strategy on 4 separate occasions with 4 different ministers and parliamentary assistants. And I know that one of the provincial officials mentioned that several Ontario municipalities had inquired about a provincial marine strategy. So I think St. Catharines' motion and Port Colborne Council's discussion this evening is very timely. I think there's a lot of political momentum for this and a lot of support for this among many other municipalities. So staff would recommend that council adopt St. Catharines' motion, but we'd also like to be given the opportunity to come back with a supportive report that council may want to take in a slightly different direction so that we have our own dialogue with provincial officials. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Long. So council, just the clerk is whispering in my ear here. If we can refer this to Mr. Long and his staff to come back with support for St. Catharines, but also with with more information based on what the needs are for the city of Port Colborne. Is that all right with the 2 movers that comes back the next meeting? Mr. Long, you're okay to bring it back next meeting? Yes? Okay. Is that all right, Councillor Wells, Councillor Clayliff?
If that'd be good.
Okay. So we'll refer it to staff to come back, not only with support for St. Catharines, but with some caveats for the city of Port Colborne also. I know Councillor Bagg, you had his hand up. Did you have allow the question before we go to a referral?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a question, Mr. Long. Because the canal is, St. Lawrence Seaway is federally regulated, I just don't know how the provincial government ties in with it. But I imagine that's going to be in your report coming back on the 27th, I imagine.
Mr. Long?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yeah, we'll make sure that our staff report speaks to that on the 27th. We believe that the province is, I wouldn't say absent on this file, but the province really needs to be more involved with a provincial marine strategy, similar to what the province of Quebec has. Quebec has a $1 billion strategy where they invest in ports and port infrastructure. They see it as economic growth, economic activity, job creation. And we believe strongly that the province should be there, whether it's for transportation, as part of a goods movement strategy. It's an economic development issue. It's a safety issue. So there's a number of strategic reasons why the province should be involved. And I think the council's discussion is timely on this matter.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Long. Councillor Baggy, is that fine?
Yeah, that's fine, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, council, if we can move to refer this, the movers have agreed to that, and it'll come back at our next meeting. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, council. 8.3 is a letter from the Niagara region, update on the Niagara official plan and further draft policy development, PDS 32-2021. I have Councillor Wells moving that, seconded by Councillor Bruno. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to make a comment with regards to this. First off, stating that I was quite disappointed with regards to section 3.3, source water protection and excess soil management. My disappointment stems from the fact that back in 2020, in specific to both of those, one in August and one in October, we as a council passed motions directing staff to amend our own official plan to provide protection for the aquifer and also to make changes to our excess soil management policies. And when I read the letter, I found that the region, my expectation was that the region was going to put something in place and in order to protect the aquifer based upon my discussions with the planner over the various years, but there was nothing in there. They've done nothing to protect the aquifer, and they've defaulted basically the excess soil management to the MECP. So from that, I have some questions in regards to where we stand as a city with regards to those motions that were passed both in October and August of 2020. So I would like to go through you, Your Worship, to the CAO, Mr. Louis, with regards to a couple of questions on both Section 3.3 and 3.7, if I may.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, the question in regards to 3.3, and that's the source water protection, I was wondering if there has been any work on our official plan, and when would that be completed to see that the aquifer is actually seeing some protection through our official plan as required by the provincial policy statement?
Mr. Louis?
Through your worship to Councillor Wells, I did discuss this with staff earlier today. I am going to defer to Amber, who is the acting director of planning and development in the absence of our regular director due to a leave of absence. But we have contracted an outside firm to take on 3 files that the department was working on in the past. And if it's okay with Amber, I'll call on her to give an update.
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, so we do recognize that we have had some staffing shortages in the planning department, but we have hired a planning consulting firm to help with some of the most important items to get them through this year. And one of those is the mineral aggregate resources and mineral aggregate operation zone bylaw amendment, including work on the source protection, water protection. They are working on it at the moment, and it will be in front of council before the end of the year.
Councillor?
All right, that deals with a question with regards to the soil management, the excess soil management, which the MAO and the zoning bylaw were addressing. Is there any work being done in regards to the source protection of the aquifer?
Madam Clerk?
So that was being considered within that zoning bylaw amendment, I believe. That motion came forward at the same time.
Councillor?
All right. I guess that would answer my questions in regards to the excess soil as well. So they're both being considered by an outside contractor, and we would be expecting to see a response to both those issues before the end of the year. Is that correct, Amber?
Yes, that's correct. You also asked about the site alteration bylaw, so I don't know if that is in the same part as this, but that is being done in-house by Public Works, and that will also come before council before the end of the year.
Okay, Councillor?
Right. Okay, that answers my questions in regards to those, regards to the Niagara Region's update, and I would really like to feel that the city has been behind this and has tried to influence the region to take ownership of protecting the aquifer and to living up to the provincial policy statement and the Clean Water Act. Actually, I know the Clean Water Act itself states it deals with municipal systems, but it also includes all water sources and future water sources as well. And the way we're going with blue-green algae, the potential is there that we may want to have the aquifer as a backup. And if that's the case, then we need to protect it. So I think we need to do a good job. We need to be leaders of this. And if we have to lean on Fort Erie, because Fort Erie is supporting the protection of the aquifer as well. But thank you for the update, Amber.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Earlier today, I was able to get a hold of Amber as acting director and David Schultz, who couldn't be here tonight. I got my specific question answered with respect to 8.3. I just wanted to add something now off the back of Councillor Wells and where we're going in the future. It will shorten my comments on 8.4, which was the only one I lifted this evening. One of the things that I noticed in 8.3 and 8.4 is there is a train rolling down the track. Whilst we're being copied on these things, there are words in there, particularly in 8.4, that councils already, this is regional council, already endorses some principles in that. In this particular 8.3, there are deadlines and input along the way. Mr. Schultz says, come into that conversation amongst area planners with the region at a point, not at the beginning, but more in maybe the first quarter or the second quarter, because our director had that in hand, and then David had to pick that up. I think what we need, to Councillor Wells' point, to what will be my point in 8.4, and I'm hoping for the rest of council, is the importance of this Niagara OP moving down the track without us really having a comprehensive briefing of this. And we're seeing this tonight by getting two reports that are already in play at the region and moving towards a conclusion. And I think we need to jump in at least potentially a lot earlier than perhaps, if not our consultants' reports speak to, but either to put a hold, a deferral, so that our staff gets up to date with Councillor Wells' questions, mine, and I'm sure all of yours. So I'm wondering, through you to the acting director, could Mr. Schultz, I understand, would be available the next time around, and perhaps our planning consultant. I'm wondering if they could appear before council and give a briefing of the Niagara Regional official plan to date and how we intersect with that and what they are concerned about and what is potentially doable, what are things that the province and the region have to abide by, and where and when we can choose our spots to push for our initiatives. So I'm wondering, Madam Acting Director in this case, can that be arranged to have our planning consultant and David give a more fulsome update on the Niagara OP?
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, we will have planning staff at the next meeting to go over some of their concerns. And as we mentioned today on the phone, and I will assure Councillor Wells as well, there's a number of concerns that planning staff have put forward, and they are in continuous conversation with planning staff at the region about these items, whether that be zoning and planning for certain lands, as well as source water protection. But the region does make the decision ultimately. We can amend our official plan and our zoning, but they do still have control of theirs, unfortunately. But I will still have planning staff at the next meeting to discuss some of those concerns.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Councillor Baggio?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As per Councillor Bruno, as long as we're getting staff coming next meeting, I'm looking at the report also about the Niagara region in the regional official plan in 2015. They had policies to address the significant threats identified for the Port Colborne water treatment intake production zones. And this is 2015, this report came in. I would just like to know, maybe next meeting, someone could go help council understand what the actual threat is to intake protection zone in our city.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, I'll forward that information onto planning staff so they are prepared to answer. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further questions?
No, I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Good. Okay, we have a motion to receive this. All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. And please send any questions on that to our staff, because I know our staff and I have had conversation on this, because I don't sit on the planning committee, but when this does come up, I will attend that meeting to bring our concerns forward at the planning committee at the region. Item 8.4 is also a letter from the Niagara region, Niagara official plan, land needs assessment and settlement area, boundary review update, PDS 33-2021. Councillor Bruno, I'll have him put on the floor, seconded by Councillor Danch. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. To follow up with what I said earlier, I spoke to the acting director and Planner Schultz today. What concerns me in 8.4, it basically talks about two things that the region is often running on with the OP. And in this particular report that we received, Niagara Regional Council were to endorse in principle the use of the Made in Niagara forecast and revised land needs assessment. That's broken up into boundaries and basically zoning and housing. And what it appears to me certainly is that they don't want to expand the urban boundary in Port Colborne as it relates to housing, yet we have some areas that might make sense to be included in that. I think that that's a steep hill to climb until we start filling some of our housing properties that are already in draft plan. What particularly worries me about this report, and it's not quite explained here, I'd asked a question and I got sort of more down into the report, but it also talks about employment lands. And so from our point of view, we know that we do not have, we have very little serviced industrial employment lands available. And we also know that we own property along Ramey Road. We also know the region is bringing water and wastewater under the canal at that point to 140. And we want to have industrial along 140 Ramey Road, that area. My concern is, after asking the question about, and what I'll say this, the already mentioned employment lands in the region, is what the region is negotiating with the province. And I'm worried that they have encapsulated employment lands around the region that they've had for a number of years, but they're not fully filled. And so if you haven't filled them, there's going to be the desire not to expand any. Well, it is my understanding, and I'll ask the mayor about this, is that whilst the region is aware that we want to put in industrial park and industrial lands along Ramey and 140, they are currently not in the catalog of region employment lands, as I understood it from Mr. Schultz. But they are aware, and they are, as best as I could get, supportive of our needs. That's all fine and dandy, and if they go along and come along and we're able to do that, great. My concern that is either by abdicating or not pushing for this now to be in the OP of the region, and that they've included those lands. At the end of the day, their OP is frozen in their own words, and the province may have approved it. And it, in my view, doesn't mean that Ramey Road in that area can be made industrial. And I know the mayor has voiced that concern down there. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have Mr. Schultz back, and our planning consultant, because whilst the acting director may be right, I'm not so sure I want to ultimately approve the Niagara official plan when it comes to employment lands if we're going to be left out of what I think is an important category and told we'll still be able to deal with it. Well, I like to see it in writing, and I'd like to see how far we can push that. So that's my comments, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if you had anything to add with respect to 8.4, and I'm happy if we can discuss that next week.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I have been speaking to staff at the region and at our meetings there. Again, I don't sit on the planning committee, but through our other committees, we have been speaking about this. The big thing here is the fact that when Mayor Badaway was here and sitting at the region, he made sure that the Highway 140 corridor area was included in our employment lands. We want to continue with that. In speaking with both Mr. Schultz and Mr. Brady in the planning department, they had some concerns which they took back to the planning department at the region, which is a good avenue, and it should be used between staff and staff. But it needs the political will between myself and Councillor Butters to drive the fact that the reason why we're bringing the wastewater across the canal where it is the fact that it actually is going to fulfill a promise that was there before to open up those lands for employment lands. So it'll be our new industrial park area. So we will be fighting at the region for that. So, and I believe I have lots of support at the regional level to continue that. So, but I do invite staff to come back at our next meeting and to give us another overview of that. Is that all right, Councillor?
That'd be great. Thank you, sir.
Good, thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, the acting director, you'll make sure that happens. Thank you. Any further questions? This is a motion to receive. Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you. And our last item is item 8.6. Is from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario with regards to a policy update. It's a draft resolution for municipal recognition of September 30th as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and new municipal resource materials. I'll have Councillors Bruno and Danch move this one. I apologize, that was the last one. Councillors Bruno and Desmarais move this one. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. In looking at that report and for September 30th, I noticed that not just in Port Colborne, but elsewhere along the region, many of the flags are still at half-mast. Don't know if Mr. Louie could speak to that and if that will be the case with respect to September 30th and what would happen thereafter.
Mr. Louie?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bruno, I think in the normal course of events, we would lower the flags for an event of this type, Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada. However, I think you've hit the nail on the head. We have our flags already lowered in remembrance of the people, the Indigenous population that was impacted by the residential schools, as well as the two recent finds of mass graves at residential schools in Canada. The flags have been lowered in recognition of that, and they're still in their lowered position. It's kind of, I guess the first time we were lowering them for a certain number of hours based on the number of victims who were found. And in the meantime, before that time was reached, there was the second finding. I think it's probably appropriate for us to bring our flags back to a normal, flying them at the full height of the flagpoles at City Hall and any other facilities where they're lowered. We didn't lower them exactly everywhere, but certainly at City Hall. We do lower them from time to time for recognizing a former employee who's passed away, a former member of council, and so on, sometimes a dignitary from outside of Port Colborne. We also have flag raisings from time to time for our various charitable organizations and in proclamations of certain weeks of the year or months of the year. And it's all complicated by the fact that our flags are lowered right now. I think my recommendation to council would be that we lower them up till and including the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th. And then on October 1st, we return to our normal flag practices which are governed by city policy and the practices that we have for lowering the flags from time to time in recognition of one of those type of occurrences that I've mentioned.
Councillor?
That's fine. Is that just you're going to proceed that way, or do you need our direction, or is that fine?
Yeah, staff can take that as direction, Councillor.
Yeah.
With regards to the draft resolution, if we can adopt the resolution, the only change or the only addition to the resolution is in the last paragraph where it says, therefore be resolved that the council of the city of Port Colborne would be placed in there, does hereby commit to recognizing September 30th, 2021 as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, National Orange Shirt Day, by sharing the stories of residential school survivors, their families, and communities. Is that all right, Councillor?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions? So, councillors, the clerk is asking that we add in the flags that the flags will be lowered. Well, they are lowered now, but continue to be lowered for September the 30th, and then re-raised on October 1st. Is that all right to add that? Is that a friendly amendment? I could take both councillors on that. Okay.
Yes.
Because we are sharing this. It is the CAOs around the region are putting this together, so that we all are united on this. Okay? All right with staff?
Perfect.
Okay. Everybody understand what we're voting for? Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, council. Okay. There are no motions tonight. Does anyone have a notice of motion? Okay. There are no minutes of boards and committees. Bylaws. We have 3 bylaws, 19.1, 19.2, and 19.3. I have Councillor Desmarais and Councillor Bruno moving the bylaws. Any questions to any of those bylaws? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. There are no confidential items, no procedural motions, no information items. Council, we are now adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.